All right, Parsha 101, Parshas Vayakhel. This week's Parsha, this week and next week's Torah portion are often read together, but because it's a leap year, they're separate, and they're actually shorter Parshios, so much shorter Torah portions, and they're a little bit of a repeat. Well, they're almost all a repeat of what we've done already, because in this week's Torah portion, it's going to go through again the building of the Mishkan. So part of what that is that we had a few weeks ago, Parshas Truma. That's the one where it spoke about the building of the Mishkan, what all the different vessels or furnishings and whatever were going to look like. So they say, that was when Hashem related to Moshe, and now Moshe is relating it to the Jewish people actually building it. But there is still a good question of why would it repeat it? It could just say, Moshe told the Jewish people everything they're supposed to do, and then got it done, right? Why does it actually goes through the whole process again? A little bit less detail and definitely less commentary, because the commentaries don't repeat, but it's still, we've seen almost all of this before. So why is it repeating it? So there is an explanation that part of the repeat of this is because the building of the Mishkan signified this home that we were going to build for God. That this was going to be, it happened after the golden calf. It was part of the rectification of the golden calf, but it was also going to be, this is where godliness was going to be most manifest in the world, right? This is the home we're building for him. And because of that, it's so precious and so special to God, and it's almost, the repeat is God's enjoying that and spending extra time with us in that, we're building a home together, we're building a home for you. And the repeat of the detail is almost the kind of delighting in the detail of it and savoring these details, because God is so much looking forward to be able to dwell in this home that we're going to build for him, right? Because of the unification and the way togetherness and all, etc., etc. Now, so this week's Torah portion again is called Vayakhel. Vayakhel comes from the verse Vayakhel Moshe es kol adas bnei Sol. Moshe gathered the assembly, the Jewish people, and so they say Vayakhel. Looking at kind of what the explanation of these words is, so Vayakhel, they could say Vayakhel is like the word Kehila, which means a congregation. So sometimes you usually see it translated as gathered, but there is also a translation that says it's kind of like assembled. And part of that is, the difference of that is that assembly means that I'm taking a lot of different parts and I'm bringing them together to create a unified whole, kind of, right? Which very much symbolized what the building of the Mishkan was about. So the building of the tabernacle was about, we're taking all the different pieces, we're going to create this one home for God, and also the differences of all these different people coming together to build this home for God. So Torah portion starts, again, all this is a recap, so we'll just go through pretty quickly. Moshe gathers the Jewish people, says this is what God commanded you to do. 6 days you're going to work, 7th day you're going to rest. Also, because at Shabbos, anybody who violates, there's different rules about the public violation of Shabbos, that it could be a capital offense. Don't kindle a fire in your home, which is part of where, if you don't have the written Torah to guide you in the understanding of if you don't have the oral Torah to guide you in the understanding of the written Torah, then you can say, that means no fires, no lights, no anything, right? You can't light the fire on Shabbos, but part of the whole chalent thing is that if it's lit before Shabbos. There's 39, we have the 39 malachos, which we call the 39 works that were done to build the Mishkan, right? So the dyeing and the gathering and this, that, whatever. But really, the 39 categories of work, that these are what's forbidden on Shabbos. And we know, because as important as the building the Mishkan was, and as important as building the tabernacle was all this must stop for Shabbos. And also what's interesting here is that the way that it's written of 6 days, it's kind of written like in a passive voice of 6 days of work shall be done. On the 7th day you'll rest. And so commentaries explain that part of the passive voice of this is because, especially if we want to look at it more of Chassidic kind of insight, is that the work is not supposed to possess us. We have to work. It's part of the way the world functions. We're not just supposed to sit around and say, okay, God, you got to provide for us, right? We actually create a vessel. We got to be involved. We got to get work done. But that doesn't mean that we are supposed to become either slaves to the work, but also that we shouldn't forget that the work is just a means to an end. It's only a vessel. God is the one who provides. God is the one who blesses us. And that's important, because without that, you might think, I must do everything in my power to make sure X, Y, and Z happens. and we got to do what we got to do, but it's ultimately God, right? By putting too much stock in the work and believing too much in the work itself, it discludes God and his true role in providing for us. Anyways, after that, it talks about how Moshe is going to receive contributions, right? You should have contributions from Truma, the donations for the Mishkan. All those who are generous of heart should bring the gold, the silver, the copper, all the different kinds of wools, right? The different dyes, the acacia wood and the oil, and all those who are wide-hearted people. They call them wise-hearted, so it's chacham lev. So these are people that I've endowed with the ability to do what needs to be done for the Mishkan. So it's not just anybody it's not just anybody on Etsy gets to step up and contribute to this. These are specific people who have been blessed to contribute to the actual craftsmanship of the Mishkan. And it goes through all the vessels and the garments that are going to be made and all that sort of stuff. It talks about also how the women step forward with their bracelets and their earrings and their nose rings and the rings for their regular rings and all these kinds of gold objects and all this gold and everything that was given to the Mishkan. It's actually an interesting thing that talks about why did God create gold. It's not here specific, it's a commentary. Like, why was gold created? Gold was created for the Mishkan, right? So we still have gold. We make many other things out of gold. We have a wedding band. There's a lot of other things in a good, positive mitzvah way that it's made out of gold. But ultimately, the purpose of gold was for the beautification of the Mishkan, right? And for all the vessels and the furnishing and whatever that went into the Mishkan. So in a way, we can actually look at almost anything in our life and think all these things that are good and all these things that I like and all these things that are great about the world. Ultimately, God would have created them for a higher purpose, and not just not just because He was throwing confetti on the table. So all these things that are so beautiful, what is the good of them? What is the ultimate good purpose that would be a Torah purpose for them? So it talks about actually also that there were certain women, so from the wise-hearted women, that it wasn't just that they brought any of these kind of the different kinds of wools, the turquoise and the red and the scarlet and all that stuff, but also that they actually spun it into yarn, right? And it speaks about that there were some who were so highly skilled that they spun it straight off of the goat's, like while it's still attached to the goat. I don't really know what that means. There's no demonstration, there's no animation in the Torah to actually visualize what that looks like, but it's obviously something that's very skilled. And part of that has to do with it's extra soft then, like it doesn't have to go through any processing or whatever, that it's at its peakness, right, while it's still attached to the goat. So they'd spin it somehow into the yarn and then detach it and then weave that right away into cloth. A whole thing there that it talks about. It's interesting. It talks about how the princes of the tribes, so they initially kind of delayed in their bringing because they were saying, oh, look, we'll just, it's not for us to step forward and all this sort of stuff. We got to encourage the people to bring and then we'll give. But by the time they stepped forward to give, there wasn't really anything left to give because the people had so eagerly brought everything that was needed. Right? And it says that after the first day, going into the second day, they just kept bringing stuff. And finally, for the first time ever, and probably the only time ever in Jewish history, in the building of a Jewish sanctuary, the leader of the people got up and said, enough, stop sending stuff. We have too much. This is more than we need right now. So the princes of the tribes, they brought the stones that were used in the breastplate, the choshen mishpat of the Kohen Gadol, and the different kind of stones, like gemstones that were used. They say that also. So then also that we have Betzalel ben Uri ben Hur. Hur is the son of Miriam. He was from the tribe of Judah, and he was going to be kind of like the overseer of everything that was going on. But he was also very skilled in all different kinds of craftsmanship. So he's also endowed, basically, with everything that had to be done. He knew how to do woodworking, and he knew how to deal with stones, precious stones, and he knew how to deal with weaving, and he knew how to do all that stuff. Right, part of what God had blessed him with, and so he was going to be the overseer of it. He's from the tribe of Yehuda, and then you have Leah ben Achisamach is from the tribe of Dan, right? And the tribe of Dan is considered one of the lower tribes, right? Yehuda, Judah, the tribe of the kings and the princes and the leaders of, and all that sort of stuff. And Dan is considered, it was from one of the maidservants, not from Rachel, from one maidservants. It's considered, he's on the lower rankings per se of the tribes, but we have one of each coming together now to show, the Mishkan, the sanctuary does not belong more or less to one kind of person, not the rich, not the righteous, or whatever. It's equally owned by all, and all are welcome to give for it, and etc. And then so Moshe tells Bezalel, okay, here are all the furnishings that you got to build, and this is how you're going to make the actual structure, and etc. And Bezalel says, should we not make the structure first, then we'll make the furnishings to go inside? And Moshe's like, that is correct. That is what is intended with this. So then it says that everything was created, right? So starting, you got the tapestries, and the walls, and the pillars, and the sockets, and the curtains, and the screen, and the ark, and the table, the shulchan, and the menorah, and the mizbeach hakatoris, where they offered the incense, and the anointing oil, and the incense itself. And you have the regular mizbeach, the sacrifices, and you have the kior, which is the wash basin, and you have all the courtyard. Everything was set up. Everything was done. And that's actually the end of this week's parsha. It's a very quick parsha. Now, just to add on one thing, in this week is the week before the first of the month of Adar. Because it's a leap year, we have two Adars. It's Adar Aleph and Adar Beis. So the second Adar is considered, quote unquote, the regular Adar, right? That's the one that we usually have when it's not a leap year. And always the Shabbos, either that Shabbos is Rosh Chodesh, so the actual first day of the month, or the Shabbos immediately before the first of Adar, we always read it's called Shabbos Shekalim. And we read the Torah portion about the giving of the half shekel. The basic reason is just because this was the time of year that they would collect it, because it was an annual tax that everyone had to give. Well, men between the ages of 20, 60, because that's military ages, had to give this half shekel silver coin. They'd have to give it to, then was the Mishkan, eventually be the Beis HaMikdash. And they also use this as a census, because you're not supposed to directly count people, right? A lot of people say, it's an Ein Har, right? The evil eye. So just the idea of that is because you start counting, it's not just people, you start counting someone's possessions and their wealth, you start counting someone else's money, right? You don't want to, you're drawing attention to it, and you don't want God to be like, wait a second, why does he have so much, right? You don't want to start putting anybody under a microscope, right? So you start directly counting people per se, and God's like, you're drawing attention to all them in not in a positive way, right? In a way of like, oh yeah, I see that. Wait a second, like he owes me for this. Oh, wait a second, right? So we don't do that. So instead, they would give the coin, and then they would count the coin and say, okay, this is what the general census is. So it's a few psukim, so it's a very few verses. So it's going to be, the Torah's going to be taken out. We're going to read from it of this Parsha Shekalim, and it's actually the beginning of last week's Torah portion. The beginning of Parshas Chassidic is about, right, the giving of the half shekel. So it just kind of repeats that. It's chapter 30, verses 11 through 16. So you can check that out again, but it's basically all these men have to give this silver half shekel, and everyone's got to give it, and poor and rich alike, they all have to give the same amount. And there's a lot of symbolism between they will only give half because we're only half of the whole, etc., etc., etc. And that is this week's Torah portions.